Hello, and welcome to Cheers to Fears, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. My name is Alex.
And I'm Tucker. Today, we'll be taking a close look into 2021's Spiral from the Book of Saw, directed by Darren, Lynn, Bousman, who also directed Saw 2, 3, and 4. This movie was pitched by Chris Rock to Lionsgate, who was fully on board with the idea and made it into a feature film.
Rock is credited as a story writer and executive producer because of his pitch. Spiral was written by Josh Stolberg and Peter Goldfinger, who also served as the writers for Jigsaw in 2017. The story of Spiral stars Chris Rock, who plays Zeke Banks in the film, working in the shadow of his father, Marcus Banks, played by Samuel L. Jackson.
And I got to look over my back for the rest of my career.
This makes things extremely difficult for Zeke when he gets put in charge as the lead detective to find a Jigsaw copycat killer who is specifically targeting cops. Now Zeke must work together with his rookie partner William to try and uncover who is behind all of these murders and the reason they are targeting the police.
Normally, this is where we would have a spoiler warning, but with this being such a brand new movie, we are going to try to be avoiding spoilers. With that being said, we do include clips that were released by Lionsgate on YouTube, such as trailers and the opening scene. So if you do not want to see anything related to the film, we recommend you watch the movie before watching the video. We will still have rules posted on the screen now if you would like to make a drinking game out of it.
It is also worth mentioning that we did not include any drink totals in this episode, specifically because we would like to keep as much mystery as possible with any new release. Also, it might be a little awkward to bring a notepad into the theater to tally the drinks. So the number of drinks you're going to have with this film is a total surprise and something you'll have to experience for yourself. Now let's get into the rules for Spiral.
As usual, we are going to be starting off with anytime there is a death on screen, you take a drink. Again, we aren't going to tell you the total number of drinks for this rule, but we will say that there are some deaths that are quite gruesome.
Next rule is, of course, when someone screams, cries, or yells, you take a sip.
That was just a diversion to get us out of the precinct!
With this being a Saw movie, you know there's likely going to be a lot of drinks for this rule.
I ain't gonna say it again, motherfucker!
Now, let's get into a few of the rules we use throughout the entire Saw franchise. We didn't use all of our franchise rules for Spiral, but we did, however, take the most relevant ones for our game. Such as rule number 3, which is you take a drink anytime a new trap is shown.
Another franchise rule we brought back is anytime flashy editing is used, you take a sip. This production style was surprisingly brought back for Spiral, despite not appearing once in Jigsaw, the previous installment of the Saw franchise. This was likely due to the direction of Bousman, as it was used in every other Saw film he directed.
Being brought back again is anytime the word game is said, you take a drink. This is pretty straightforward and doesn't need much explanation.
You wanna play games, motherfucker? Alright, I'll play.
Another very straightforward rule we brought back is anytime John Kramer or Jigsaw is said, you take a drink.
Jigsaw copycat. That could be difficult.
The rule for Jigsaw being said was used in every Saw drinking game that we made, while John Kramer was only used in the previous drinking game for the movie Jigsaw.
Jigsaw?
Yeah, Jigsaw.
Jigsaw Killer was dead.
Anytime a pig is shown in any form, you are obliged to take a drink. This includes the pig masks, puppets, real pigs, statues, or even a balloon of a pig. This rule is brought back and slightly adjusted from our drinking game from Saw 5.
The final franchise rule that we brought back, which again is slightly tweaked, is anytime a recording is played, you take a sip. So this includes the classic tape recorders, while also including recordings on USB drives, TVs, etc.
With the franchise rules out of the way, let's get right into the rules that are specifically for Spiral. Starting with any time a box is opened, we encourage you to have a sip. For having such a random sounding rule, it happens more than you would expect.
Next on our list is having a drink anytime a corrupt action is mentioned or performed by a cop. This could be someone describing what another cop did.
You have taken the witness stand many times and railroaded innocent people with your lies, putting them away in jail.
Or an action a cop is shown committing throughout the movie.
Another new rule for Spiral is whenever a family member is mentioned, including but not limited to wives, kids, or parents, take a drink. Families seem to be a bit of a running theme throughout this film.
What do you got there?
Oh, it's just my wife, Emma. This is my son, Charlie.
Enjoy it while it lasts.
This rule should be obvious, as it's the main title of the film. It's whenever a spiral is shown or said, you take a drink. While we aren't going to tell you how many times a spiral is shown, we will warn you that there's going to be some mercy rules applied here.
Last, but certainly not least, we had to include the rule stating anytime Samuel Jackson uses any form of the word fuck, you may have a sip.
Motherfucker.
With this being such an iconic trait that Jackson uses in almost every character he plays, we couldn't resist the opportunity to include this in our drinking game.
And that wraps up all of the rules for our Spiral drinking game. As mentioned, we aren't going to disclose how many drinks were involved in this movie, but if anyone watching this video participates in the game, we would love to hear about your experience in the comments below. This also means we aren't going to be discussing our experience drinking to the movie and just jumping right into our thoughts on the movie. So Alex, where would you rank Spiral in comparison to the other Saw movies?
So for myself, I would rank it probably just above of Jigsaw. I like this one more than Jigsaw. You could even debate that I think it was higher than Saw 3 or 6 on my rankings. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's right in around that number 5 range for me.
Yeah, I would actually almost 100% agree with what you said there. The only thing I would say is I don't think it's above Saw 3 or 6, but I do agree it's totally above Jigsaw, so it would be in my number 5 as well.
Oh yeah, there's no way that it was as bad as some of the other ones like 7, 5, or 4.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that had to do with them bringing Bousman back to direct. I think that he's probably both of our favorite Saw directors.
Oh yeah.
He directed Saw 2, Saw 3, and Saw 4, with the exception of Saw 4. Mm-hmm. The other 2 movies were both in our top 3 or 4 Saw films, so yeah. I think he's the most consistent out of any director.
The one thing that he did bring back was his style. So as you can see, there was a lot more grungy sets, such as having his film locations in abandoned buildings. Right. There was a lot more of that, grimy subways, that kind of example. Mm-hmm. On top of that, there was the flashy editing, or jumpy editing, that was included back. Rather than Jigsaw, there was just a complete break from it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the biggest factors. You mentioned the locations. Like, they're always in dark lit and grungy places, as you said. Mm-hmm. And I think that helps with a Saw setting much more. Like, for example, in Saw 7, it was all done in very bright lighting, which took away from the atmosphere, I think. But with Spiral, I feel like it was done a lot more efficiently because it was in a dark setting like that.
Mm-hmm. On top of that, the plot line was also a lot easier to follow. So in most of the Saw movies, it was generally 2 plot lines that we had to follow all at once. Even with Saw, you would say it was the only exception, but even with Saw, there was the main bathroom scene, or the main bathroom trap. But as opposed to the bathroom, you also had to follow Detective Tapp and Singh and their adventures in trying to find who the Jigsaw killer is.
Yeah, and in the first Saw movie, there was a lot of flashbacks going back to different time periods that weren't necessarily related to Lawrence Gordon and Adam in the bathroom trap. It was completely different traps just to kind of give Jigsaw a little bit of a backstory in that movie. And while there is flashbacks in Spiral, they all link together with the same story that's going on in the present time. So it doesn't take us out of the story that we're following the whole movie.
Yeah, it didn't take us out of the main story at all. The only reason that they were in it is because it was very plot relative for the most part.
Yeah, it gave more context to the plot. Mm-hmm. Even though the plot was pretty solid, the twist was still quite predictable.
Yeah.
I think you said you predicted it within the first 20 minutes of the movie, and I was around the same time, I think.
We not only predicted the plot within the first 20 minutes, we predicted the motive behind the plot, too, within the first 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. With that being said, I don't think it took away from the story all that much. Mm-hmm. Like, the plot twist, it was weaker, but it also wasn't the main focal point of the film. I thought, at least. I didn't interpret it that way. So that's why it didn't rank lower, in my opinion, such as Saw 5, which had a very predictable twist as well. Mm-hmm. But that one just wasn't executed as well as this one.
Yeah, exactly. So in all fairness, we were watching Saw for basically a straight month. So that might have made it easier for both of us to spot the twist so quickly. The other thing that I did like about this movie is they didn't try to hammer in a lot of references to your face.
Yeah.
So, for example, there was only a few references to other Saw movies. One of which is, I guess, Chris Rock holding a saw being chained to a pipe.
Yep. Another example is you see pictures of Jigsaw laid out on the table in the police room. And actually, you even see Obby from Saw 2 on the board in the police case study room.
But other than that, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and there's not a whole lot other than the obvious stuff like the corrupt cops is obviously a cliche and Saw the.
But it's not as much as a callback as it is a cliche for the films.
Things like the corrupt cops or the tape recordings are less of Easter eggs and they're more just a running theme throughout the Saw franchise.
I guess they did have a lot of things that did repeat to kind of keep the storyline running along, with still it being the same story, just from like the traps or the tapes. But there was other things that made it kind of a unique story. The biggest example of this is a new voice that they used in the recordings.
Hello, Detective Boswick.
Yeah, and what were your thoughts about the new voice?
I didn't mind it all that much. I mean, to be fair, it's a stretch to take away from John Kramer just because his voice was so iconic throughout the movies.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I know you didn't like it, did you?
No, I didn't like it because, I don't know, to me, it sounded like a nasally teen talking through the recording.
Yeah.
And it didn't sound very intimidating. Where on the other hand, you have Jigsaw, who has a very intimidating, raspy voice that's kind of like, you don't know what to think about it. But then this one, it kind of just sounds, I don't know, it doesn't sound like it's a Saw voice, if that makes sense to me.
Yeah. It makes it feel like kind of a different movie in a sense.
Yeah. And I guess that's what they're going for. They are trying to get a new movie out of this and not just continue on with the same story. So I get what they're trying to do, and I appreciate that they're trying to add something new to it. But I feel like they could have changed the voice, but done it in a different way.
Yeah, they could have changed that. I guess something else that they added new to the movie is Chris Rock, which we generally don't see him in a horror movie role at all.
Yeah, like, not only horror, but just serious roles in general. He hasn't done a whole lot of them. Normally he's like a stand-up comic or in a comedy movie.
Yeah.
But I thought he actually did a decent job in this film.
Yeah, I liked him a lot in this film. And it's not to say that he didn't have his funny moments. He definitely did have his funny moments.
Yeah, exactly.
But when he was serious, you could actually see the emotion in his face. I think he was a good actor.
Yeah. And that might be because Chris Rock is supposedly a huge fan of the Saw franchise. And as we mentioned at the top of the video, he is the one who pitched this idea to Lionsgate. So maybe that's why he was able to put himself in that universe so well.
Yeah, it's probably just because that's the way he envisioned the character, because he could have just made the character.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of Chris Rock, he plays a cop in this movie. Do you want to go into some of the corrupt police tactics that we see in this Saw movie?
Yeah, so in this movie, they turned it up from generally a 5 in the franchise to an 11.
Yep.
So I guess some of the things they also do is going in places without warrants, no backup, and there was like clear police brutality in this movie, like things that people would freak out over today, and I don't blame them. Like these police were not kind people.
Yeah, no, not at all. The film was very clearly trying to make a statement about corrupt police and police brutality, specifically in North America, because it is an ongoing issue or debate that is, even to this day, is going on.
So they were also doing that in previous Saw movies, such as William Easton in Saw 6. He was one of those kind of people that were corrupt, shady, and Jigsaw felt like that he had to test him just because of his corrupt tactics through his company.
So on another note, we can talk about the gore in the movie. In this movie, I think out of all the Saw movies, this had the most realistic looking gore.
Oh, definitely.
And the traps were very easy to put yourself into, which increased the cringe level and made them harder to watch than some of the other Saw traps. With saying that, Saw 7 is more gory, but the gore in this movie looks a lot more realistic.
Yeah.
So just adding on to the traps without spoiling anything, we don't get to see the dread and torture the victims go through like we do in other Saw films. They kind of just rush through some of the traps, and I don't know, I wish they would have spent more time and fleshed out the traps and let us see it linger on it a little bit longer.
Yeah. So I guess the first one where they kind of had a little bit of the person suffer, and you can kind of see it just because of his tongue, is the subway trap, which is on YouTube on Lionsgate if you want to see that. It's a good one to start the movie on for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I really did like how gory that one was with the tongue being ripped out.
Yeah.
And then you got to see the tongue later on again. But yeah, it was just a nice gory trap to start off the movie.
Yeah. This is one trap that I'm pretty sure Mary Shaw lost her life into.
Yeah. So I guess that leads us right to the finger trap, which the concept of this trap was really cool, I thought. But again, they didn't spend enough time on this, and if they would have spent more time on it, it could have been so much more impactful and a lot more difficult to watch.
Yeah, which again is the other thing that I ranked it so low. A lot of the traps were definitely not as great. This movie had almost as many traps as I think the first Saw movie, which is not a lot.
I mean, it had more traps, but I feel like because it went through them so much, it just didn't feel like that effective.
Yeah, the traps definitely weren't too effective in this movie. Speaking of underwhelming traps, I wasn't a big fan of the hot wax trap.
No, I would say that's my least favorite trap in the whole movie.
Yeah, you guys see a little bit of the aftermath, like the hot face, but that's pretty much it. And even then, like, it doesn't feel like a whole lot.
No. I did like the effects with the makeup for how her face looked afterwards.
Yeah.
But that's about all I'll say about that.
Yeah. And then after that, you have Zeke's trial. And then with that, you have one of the better traps of the movie, I'll say, such as the glass grinder.
Yeah, that one was pretty good. And that's actually one that they spent more time on and actually fleshed out.
Mm-hmm.
You got to see the agony that the victim was going through. You have got to see other things that were involved that we won't get into too much detail. But yeah, it was just a better trap. And I think because they spent that extra time on it, it was more effective in that way.
This is one of the traps that I feel like would be a little bit more meaningful if Jeff tried to do in his trial, because A, it would have been harder. It wouldn't have just been 1, 2, 3 easy. Mm-hmm. It would be one that you'd have to try to do directly, and it would be a lot harder to do.
And so that leads us to the final trap. We'll call it the puppeteer trap, just so we don't spoil anything. This one, I feel like it could have been my favorite in the movie. But again, they didn't spend enough time on it, and it just wasn't fleshed out. The concept of it was so cool, I thought. Mm-hmm. And the way that they hinted at it in the scenes prior, I feel like was done very well. It's just they didn't spend enough time on it again, and therefore it fell flat in a way.
Yeah, it can be seen kind of symbolized through, I guess, the pig marionette. The main problem that I have with pigs in this movie is they're more or less used as a derogatory term for policing, whereas it should have stuck to the main purpose of it, which in the original films it was through rebirth. Because John's son was supposed to be born through the year of the pig, and pig in the Chinese zodiac means rebirth. Mm-hmm. So I would have liked that concept a little bit more, but I feel like the whole pig thing's just them trying to force on the whole political agenda a little bit too much, which kind of takes me away from the movie, and I didn't like that.
That's fair. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's worth mentioning also that the pig marionette is the replacement for the Billy doll. Mm-hmm. I thought that the pig puppet was a pretty good replacement overall. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's not as recognizable as Billy, because Billy had 8 other movies to formulate his iconic stature, but I did like the pig puppet. I
have a bit of a love and hate relationship with that pig doll. So I like it because it's something different away from Billy, especially when obviously Jigsaw's dead. There's no other Jigsaw apprentices in the movie or anyone like that. So it's just somebody completely new, so I liked how they're doing something different. However, I still, as you said, I dislike the fact that they're taking away something that was so symbolic with all the other movies.
But I think because of the statement that they were trying to make with pigs being cops, I feel like that was obviously intentional, and I know you didn't like it, but I kind of thought it was a good way to call cops pigs. Whether you agree with that statement or not, that's besides the point. I feel like the pig puppet is a good way to correlate the derogatory term for cops, as well as the symbol that was used in Saw. So I guess another random piece of trivia for this movie is there was actually a Pulp Fiction reference, which was on the police vault door in the case room. The company that made that door was called Jules and Vincent, which is actually the names of the characters portrayed by Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of interesting, and because they had Samuel L. Jackson as an actor in this, I felt like that was a good little nod to such an iconic film such as Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. The only thing that would have made it a little bit better or even more amazing, I feel like if they had John Travolta in the movie, it would have been top-notch, honestly.
Yeah. Even if he was just like an extra or something, like an eyewitness or whatever, it could have been fun to have in that.
So on that note, we would normally proceed with the Darwin Awards ceremony, but again, with this being such a new movie, we wanted to avoid as many spoilers as possible. So we won't be nominating any characters today, but we wanted you to decide that for yourself. Let us know in the comments below who you think deserves the award.
If you want to check out our drinking game to the first Saw movie, click the top video to the right. To check out all of our other drinking games, click the playlist right below it. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss next week's episode where we take a look at 2018's A Quiet Place. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying cheers to fears.